So I finally got around to watching Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken by DreamWorks Animation. It's one of those films that when the trailer first dropped way back when, I definitely intended to go and see it, but it never really gripped me all that much, and so I kept putting it off until I just didn't care anymore. Even when it came to streaming, it just had this overwhelming aura of meh surrounding it, so I just couldn't bring myself to bother with watching it. Today I figured though, why not? I have some free time to watch a movie of potentially dubious quality, so here we are. I sat down to watch it, but before I did, I decided I'd take a look and see what people thought of it and how well it did, because I never really saw many people talking about it, so I figured that many, like myself, didn't bother. From what I've seen in terms of reviews, it did decently. A 66% critical score and an 82% audience score. But at the same time, it has way less reviews than you'd expect from a DreamWorks movie, if we're being honest. Then I took a look at the box office and my god, it was a massacre. A box office bomb. Damn. So it didn't make back its budget. It cost $70 million to make, which already feels low for an animated film of this era, yet it only managed to gross $46 million, which is insanely low. Apparently it did so badly that it ended up being DreamWorks' worst ever opening weekend, tying with Sinbad. Yes, Sinbad, The Legend of the Seven Seas, the very film that almost killed the studio. Hard to do quite that badly, but congrats Ruby, you got it done. So then I sat down to watch the film. It's definitely not great. I think it firmly sits somewhere between mediocre and meh overall for me. That being said though, surely this has to go down in history as one of the worst marketed films of all time. I took a look at the trailers and they were just bad. They don't paint the film in a good light. They spoil the supposed twist villain in the trailer when she doesn't have that reveal in the movie until the last 10 minutes or so. It isn't clear who the film's meant to be for in terms of its target audience and demographic, and it just looks trash. It's like it's one of those made-for-streaming movies that they don't expect to do very well, but simply are made to pad out the service. So I'm not surprised that seemingly almost nobody bothered to go and see this in cinemas. Why would you, when it seems like a certainty that it's going to be absolutely terrible? The studio clearly didn't put in their best effort, so why should you spend your money on garbage? Especially since at the same time, stuff like Spider-Verse and Elemental were playing in cinemas. They only have themselves to blame for this one, and lots of reasons have been given by different publications to try to explain how it ended up like this and why it did so poorly. But at the end of the day, if something looks like it stinks in the trailer, even at a distance, you're going to assume it stinks. That's what's happened here. But now it's time for us to get into the nitty-gritty of the movie, am I right? Okay. So when we're dealing with an animated movie, there's usually three major categories that make a good film: visuals, audio, narrative. So I suppose we'll start with the visuals. I'm insanely mixed on this side of things. On the one hand, I love some of the fluidity of the movement of the characters, especially the boneless Kraken characters. I like that touch. Gave a bit of a goofy vibe. On top of that, I really enjoyed the design of the town and a lot of the characters. Ruby's friends, for instance, a really unique sort of visual style that I enjoyed, and I thought the design choice of having the villain be Ariel was rather cheeky and amusing. That being said though, the longer the film went, the uglier it became, and the more it resembled a modern version of those made-for-VHS rip-off films of the 90s. At the very end of the movie, there's this big monster fight in the ocean, with the three giant krakens versus the Mermaid Queen. The battle itself is slow and clunky, and my god, the design they chose for the demonic trident-empowered mermaid is just horrific! She looks like she's from a PS2 game! I mean, at times the movie in general feels like a PS2 game, just less fun. So in terms of the visuals, for the most part, it had good character and world design, but in terms of its animation quality, it was only okay most of the way through, only to flounder right there at the very end when it mattered the most, and it just drags it down. On the other side of the coin though, we have the audio. This movie continues a long line of DreamWorks films having killer integration of songs into the score. DreamWorks probably does this better than any other studio, using existing songs to set the mood of a scene, and Ruby Gillman is no exception. Just really well done. I also like to lump voice acting into this category as well. Voice acting is another element that DreamWorks usually does really well. They seem to have a great casting department, I suppose, and this film is once again no exception. The voice acting is way better than the film deserves, and it certainly drags what is at times a dull and lifeless script into becoming something interesting. There's not really anything bad I can think of here, it's just really solid. God damn. What a waste of a cast. They deserved a better project for sure. So this brings us to the narrative. Ruby Gillman tells the story of, well, Ruby Gillman, a teenage Kraken living with her family, all of them masquerading as humans in a seaside town known as Oceanside. Very original. Although she's a Kraken, she's never been into the water because her mother frequently tells her that it's too dangerous. They had to leave it due to monster attacks. So of course, being a pretend human, she's always struggled to fit in, and has many different regular human problems she has to deal with and struggle with, you know, boys and stuff. So this is where our story begins. Prom is on the way, and while she has been banned from going by her mother, as it would be on a boat and thus on the ocean, she still plans to ask her crush and sneak out. Her promposal backfires and he gets knocked out by a confetti cannon, which requires her to jump into the water to save him, but unknown to her, somebody else, Chelsea, does the same. So Chelsea gets all the credit and is quickly worshipped at school, whilst Ruby begins to transform into a giant kraken, and so has to run away before anybody notices. Regardless, when she was in the water, a magical pulse alerted her maternal family of her location, so her uncle turns up, her mum's mad, and she's mad at her mum for lying about her. Classic teen stuff. So she bullies her uncle into helping her, they go and meet grandma, and they get exposition about the 3 women in their family being the world's only giant kraken, as well as royalty, and the protectors of the ocean. Oh, and mermaids are bad, Kay, and they had a big war, which is why Ruby's mum took them to the surface to begin with. It's around about here that Chelsea is revealed to be the supposed daughter of Nerissa, the mermaid queen, and who spins a tale about how the mermaids are all oppressed and it's sad, etc, etc. Ruby eats it up and they become friends. Ruby ditches all her other human friends and gets training from Grandmama, so she'll be able to help Chelsea get her hands on the trident. Eventually, her mum finds out, they fight, mum confronts Grandmama, and they realise that Chelsea is actually just Nerissa, and thus is evil. She gets the trident, she goes full Ursula, and then the 3 Krakens team up and use their laser vision to destroy the trident and defeat Nerissa for good. Everybody in Oceanside thinks giant Krakens are swell now, she gets the boyfriend, and we all wonder in horrified fascination how the mechanics of that relationship are ever supposed to work. I have to say that this whole story, it's just bleh. It's a bunch of bleh. I think it actually really starts strong. It has a decently interesting premise and opening with a lot of mystery being built up. I think it's actually a rather good film at first. At times it does feel like, as one critic said, the writers have taken the story and script of Turning Red and Luca and fed them through an AI to create this new Franken script, but it's still enjoyable, if derivative. Hell, the whole sequence up to her running away to meet her Kraken Queen grandmother is all fine and dandy to me. Except for one thing, it takes 35 minutes to get there, which is another thing about this film, it's just badly paced, but we'll address that more as we go. Because it's after that meeting with her grandma that the film changes and the overall story begins to fall apart. For starters, we have a very lame and cliche royal defender of the ocean storyline where she simply gets a massive exposition dump about how her family in the female line are a bunch of chads, and that her mum was the chattiest Chad that ever did Chad. She took out the mermaid queen and took the trident away from her and locked it away. Oh, what a badass, right? And the exposition just drags on and on. Then she leaves and meets Chelsea, who she finally interacts with about halfway through the movie. And the next close to 20 minutes of the film are then dedicated to building up this friendship and showing how over the course of a couple of days, Ruby and Chelsea become tight due to their shared ocean heritage, and mutually decide that they can get the trident back in order to ensure that mermaids can live free and in peace. Along the way, Ruby neglects her friendships with her original group of friends, but it doesn't really impact us, because she spent so much of the film not being with them. Once the Kraken stuff starts to happen, they heavily fade out of the narrative, and so their bond and connection, it never got that time needed to impact the audience. So you do understand that she's being a shit friend, but it's hard to care about it at the same time. Regardless, the big story is about building the bond between her and Chelsea, which is also hard because we're pressed for time, and it's largely done via montage and not much dialogue. On top of that, the film was marketed with this mermaid, this specific mermaid, being known as the villain. So this whole thing, this whole twist, it was stupid. It felt like a waste of time and lingered on way too long. Seriously, the film spends 20 minutes building up this doomed friendship where you know for a fact, that Chelsea's going to betray Ruby because you saw it happen in the trailer where she was noted to be the villain for being a mermaid. But also because they literally showed off her big evil form too. What's worse though, is that when she does turn on her and takes the trident for herself, this badly paced film is actually almost over. I'm pretty sure she gets to be the main antagonist of the movie for under 10 minutes before she gets defeated. Seriously, all that build and it ends so quickly. How does an idea like that get out of the planning stages? Also, the romance, it was completely undercooked, much like her friendships with her squad. And there was also enough forced pop culture references that in true Hollywood fashion were woefully outdated, that it was enough to make me want to switch it off at points. It's just sad because the skeleton of it has potential. Hell, there's this Moby Dick spoof side plot which is really funny, where Ruby's dad, uncle and brother try to throw a local hunter off the scent. That's fun, but the actual main story is left with little to recommend it. And it's a shame because the concept is a good one, it's just really bad execution, and so I'm not surprised it ended up like it did. Beyond that though, don't really have much else to say. And so we'll just remind you that these have all been my opinions, and I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of Ruby Gillman if you've seen it? Judging by the box office, you probably haven't, but still, did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.